Hi everyone, we're going to talk about how to hit a golf ball solid. I'm going to explain a few important concepts as well as give you some actionable items that will help you to hit the golf ball more solid. But before we get to that, if you're enjoying this free content, please support us by liking the video when it's over, subscribing to my YouTube channel, and commenting. Okay, so obviously there's a lot of variables that go into hitting a golf ball solid, but what we're going to focus on in this video is we're going to focus on weight transfer, and there's another word we use when it comes to weight transfer, and they're synonymous, is a pivot. So the first thing I'd like to define is, what's a pivot? So a pivot, very simply, is getting my belt buckle to the target. Now, there's something really important when we consider a pivot and getting our belt buckle to the target, is I can get my belt buckle to the target and still have a lot of weight on my trail foot. So when we get this belt buckle to the target, we want it to be three-dimensional. We not only want it to turn to the target, but we also want it to get closer to the target. So you can see as I make my pivot, or I create my weight transfer, that's the weight moving from my left side back to my right side, you can see I'm also getting closer. And it's a very important concept in golf, and I can say a large percentile, I can't quite put a number on it, but a large percentile of people who come to my golf school, stand on my lesson tee, don't understand a pivot and don't know how to make it happen, and that's what we're going to talk about in this video. So again, all we're talking about so far is, can I get my belt buckle to the target, not only turn to the target, but moving a little closer? And let's give it a little try here. So you could see dynamically in that shot, I was turning to the target and my belt buckle was getting closer. And we're going to dig a little deeper. I'm going to give you a few things that you can key in on that'll help you with your pivot. But let's start with setup. And when we measure tour players, what we see, and we're talking about the ball on the ground now. We're going to talk about hitting the ball on the ground, and then we're going to talk about the driver because they're a little bit different. But right now we're focused on hitting the ball on the ground. So when we measure players, and we have all these pressure mats that we can stand on, they now have these individual force plates, dual force plates that we can stand on and measure what's going on, how students are using the ground or using their feet to swing a golf club. So when we measure tour players, the average, we see a little more weight on the forward foot than we do the trail foot. And remember, that's an average. That means there's some that do it more, there's some that do it less. So from a setup standpoint, and what I teach at my golf school and I work on a lot with students, is to get that weight a little more forward. I'll just drop a tee on the ground and I'll have them put it under their front foot or their lead foot. And so what I'm going to feel is I'm going to feel like I'm just putting a little more pressure into that tee, and as I go through the golf swing, I'm going to feel like I keep a little more pressure on that tee, or I'm pushing that tee into the ground. And I'll give you a little bit more on that in just a second. So again, you can see I've got just my tee under my right foot. This is a great way for you to practice. I'm putting a little more pressure on that tee as I take the club back. You can see that keeps me very centered over the golf ball. But the big thing, and I've shot other videos about this, is it helps us to get the bottom of the swing, or the low point, or the divot, whatever you want to refer to it as, in front of the golf ball, which we know when we're hitting the ball off the ground is of absolute importance. So again, setting up, a little more weight on my front foot or pushing down on that tee. And when I hit this golf ball, I'm just going to feel like I just keep pressure on that tee as I go back. So again, divot in front of the golf ball, felt really good, nice high straight shot. So let's get into this a little deeper, because some of you in classic golf instruction talks about I've got to load up on the trail leg and then transfer my weight back. And through science and more recent study of the golf swing, what we find, and I have a friend who has those dual force plates I was talking about, where you stand on each one and it measures each foot. And what he finds with tour players is that they tend to stay, or at the top of their backswing, they're 70% here. And when he measures amateurs or everyday players, when they get to the top of the backswing, they're over here. And think about, if I get over here, that creates a lot of timing in the golf swing that I now have to push forward really hard to get that divot in front of the golf ball. So the other thing, and I've kind of termed it this way, think of golf professionals or tour professionals as front wheel drive. So they get to the top of the backswing, the weight's already over here, 70% as I said, and they're pulling or dragging themselves through impact. So they're front wheel drive. And the amateurs that we see day in and day out on our lesson tee load up over here and they're pushing, so they're more rear wheel drive, and they struggle to get that divot in front of the golf ball. So again, first thing we want to do to start to work on this weight transfer, put a little more weight on that forward foot, throw a tee under your foot, put some pressure on it, and keep that pressure on it through the golf swing. So the next thing we're going to talk about as it pertains to the weight transfer or the pivot is what I refer to as a PGA Tour or an LPGA Tour finish, depending on who's standing in front of me and who I'm teaching. And what I mean by that is when I finish my golf swing, you can see my belt buckle is pointed to the target, my trail toe is in the ground, the club is over my right shoulder. It would be a left shoulder if you're a right-handed golfer. And really, really important is I'm in balance. So a drill or something actionable that can help you to get to this position, I'm going to show you in just a moment. So we make a practice swing, we get to our finish, and we just tap that trail toe. Now if I make a practice swing and I get to my finish and I have to transfer a little weight before I tap that toe, well, that tells me that I didn't pivot right. You know, my PGA Tour finish or my LPGA Tour finish is not right. And I have a lot of students that come to me, and through impact they like to keep this, and I teach a lot of clients online as well through the Swing Index app, but I see as they hit the golf ball, all their weight is on their trail foot, which we know from the first segment that that's not correct. And so a way, and thinking more mechanically, that I get them to get that trail foot in the air is we can associate it with something. If I get my left hip to the target or my trail hip to the target, guess what? That releases the trail foot. So if I push this trail hip all the way to the target, there's no way that that foot's going to stay down. And so when I see these people that are very flat-footed at impact, I also see their hips aren't open very much. And so the thought there, or what you might need to work on, is just feeling like that trail hip gets going towards the target. Remember, three-dimensionally, I'm not just turning it to the target, but it's also getting closer to the target. And that'll help you with that. So let's talk a little bit more about this PGA Tour, LPGA Tour finish. So I'd like you to make some practice swings. Remember, from the first segment, we're going to start with a little more pressure on this right side. I'm going to imagine that tee's under my foot. I'm going to keep pressure on that side, and I'm going to keep my trail hip going to the target, and I'm going to finish with my belt buckle to the target, my trail toe in the ground, and in balance. So let's give it a try. So I'm set up, a little weight forward. I make my swing, I hold my finish. So again, I don't have to transfer any weight to tap my trail toe. And you can see my belt buckles to the target. And I could hold this position the rest of the day if I wanted to. And we watch PGA Tour players, and they hit great shots often. And what we see is after they hit that great shot, they just pose and they watch the ball flying at their target because they're in balance and they can stand here forever. The people I see on my lesson tee day in and day out is they get done with their swing and they're trying to catch themselves. They're out of balance. And some of that could have to do with rhythm and tempo. When I'm swinging at a speed my body can't contain, obviously it's going to be hard for me to keep that balance. What I want to do is talk about a few different clubs. We were hitting an iron there, ball's on the ground, we know the divot has to be in front of the ball. But I get the question all the time, when I get to a hybrid or a fairway wood, am I still hitting down or do I want to sweep them? And the answer is I'm going to treat it just like the iron. I'm going to get a little weight forward and I want to strike down. I still want the divot, bottom of my swing, the low point to be in front of the golf ball. Now because a hybrid has a flat sole plate and a fairway wood has a flat sole plate, you're not going to dig and cut as big a divot as you would with, say, a 7-iron, a wedge. But what's going to happen is this is going to hit the ground, it's going to deflect, so it's going to leave more of like a tiny looking divot or more of a scrape or scratch of the grass. But my intention here should be the same as what I was doing moments ago with the iron. So I move the ball position a little forward because it's a little longer club. I like to see it off the forward ear, right ear, left ear, depending on whether you're left-handed or right-handed. So I'm going to play it off my forward ear. I'm going to put a little bit more weight. That tee is still under my foot in my mind. I'm going to keep pressure on that. And then I'm going to work on getting my left hip to the target and holding that PGA Tour finish. So you can see, good shot, got a little bit of interaction with the turf, not as much as I see with the iron because the club kind of hits and deflects more. But again, I'm going to treat this more like an iron. So at my golf schools I teach, there's the ball on the ground, or really there's the driver and then there's everything else. And we're going to get to the driver in a second and you'll understand why I say that. But when I'm hitting the ball off the ground, I'm going to have a little more weight forward, want to get the bottom of the swing in front of the golf ball, and my intention is hitting down. When I get to the driver now, and the same thing holds true if you're on a par 3 and you're hitting an iron or a hybrid off the tee and you got it teed really low. My intention is still to hit down and get that divot in front of the golf ball. So now with the driver, it's just a little bit, there's two of the concepts or the things that we talked about that we're going to do, but there's one that we're going to shut off. So when we get to the driver, remember the geometry is different. The ball is now in the air. It's not resting against the ground. I'm going to move the ball forward again because I've got a longer club in my hand. And what we're going to shut off is I'm not going to put any weight forward now because I don't want to hit down on it. I actually want to hit up on the driver. So I'm going to have that ball forward, and if anything, I'm going to have a little more weight over here, say, 55, 60% on my trail foot. But the other two things, as far as getting my trail hip to the target, holding my PGA Tour finish, still hold and are really, really important to get that proper weight transfer, to get that pivot, and to finish in my PGA or LPGA Tour balanced finish. So let's give this a try. So I've got the ball a little more forward than I did with the other clubs. Not putting weight here. I actually have a little over here, probably 55, 60%. And then I'm going to get that trail hip to the target, and hold my PGA Tour finish. And notice I finished in balance too with that PGA Tour finish. Okay, so earlier in the video I talked about tour players being front wheel drive and amateurs being more rear wheel drive. And I want to talk about that just a little bit more, help you understand that concept. And I also want to give you a drill, and it's an old drill that we do in a little bit of a new way since the research has gone better and we now have those dual force plates that I was talking about. So what we see with tour players is they get left a lot earlier in the golf swing than amateurs do. And what I mean by that is when they get to the top of the backswing, they're about 70% loaded on this front leg, and they're pulling or dragging themselves through impact. So they would be more front wheel drive. And then with the amateur, we see them loading up on this side, and then they're pushing through impact, and they're more rear wheel drive. And so a step drill that I've done for a long time to help people with weight transfer, to help them with the pivot, is I would have them start with their feet together, and when they get to the top of the backswing, step and then deliver the club. And a little bit of a change that we've made to that is that we now want it to start earlier. So when I start my backswing is when the step should be happening. And some of you might think about that and be like, wow, that's pretty early. But let's look at a few other sports. So let's look at a pitcher in baseball. When the arm starts back, what happens? They step into their left foot. Tom Brady throwing a football. Arm goes back, step is going on. Tennis. Racket goes back, foot goes forward. So we're going to see the same thing as far as a drill, and to help you get left, if you're a right-handed player, it'd be right if you're a left-handed player, but to help you get left earlier in the golf swing. So simply start with your feet together. As soon as that club starts back, I want you stepping to your left side, and then go ahead and finish, get to that PGA Tour finish. So I hope you now have a better idea of how to hit a golf ball solid and how to create proper weight transfer as well as a good pivot. And just to go over those few drills, I want a tee under your front foot, just helps us get a little bit more forward and stay forward. Makes us that front wheel drive player. We can use our trail hip, pushing that to the target to get our pivot, and then finish in our PGA Tour finish, where the belt buckle's to the target, the rear toe is in the ground, club is over my right or left shoulder, depending on whether you're a right-handed or left-handed player. And then that last drill that I gave you there, to make sure that we get left early enough in the golf swing, is very simply start with your feet together, and as soon as that club starts moving, just like in other sports, as soon as that club starts moving, we're stepping towards the target. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I have a few more here right now that I promise will help you to continue to improve your game. And remember, please like, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and comment.